Hey, what's up? Dave with Brazos Valley Strength. And today we're going to be talking about belt squats. Now, I do think that this is going to be a relatively simple video, but I think that it should help a lot of people get a whole lot more out of their belt squats, but specifically make their belt squats actually transfer over to their squats a whole lot more effectively and hopefully increase your competition max for powerlifting. So that's going to be the big framework of this video, is not just how to make your legs bigger or anything like that. I think that there's a lot of good information in my hypertrophy video for powerlifting. I'd encourage you to watch that. I do think that there's going to be a lot of concepts that overlap here, so I'll touch on a few things from that video. But the main thing is going to be specifically, how do we make belt squats actually show up in our competition squat? Because I think that that is one of the big issues that so many powerlifters have when they put in belt squats into their program, is they may be doing an okay job actually making their legs stronger, building their quads, but not actually helping themselves get stronger in the squat when it could give you significantly faster returns. So if you don't have a belt squat, I thought of that. So this is actually a really good home gym hack that you can use to set up belt squats for yourself. I actually have used this one a little bit previously, years ago. I set this one up in my gym, Brazos Valley Barbell, that I used to own, because I was starting to coach more people and just got a belt squat and was seeing huge returns from it at that point. And so I really wanted more people to be doing it and experimented a little bit with how to set these up. So I think some other people have tried some stuff like loading pins and things like that. I always just felt like those were kind of unstable and hard to really make heavy enough. But doing this with a barbell and a rack can be really good. So if you have a combo rack, like a powerlifting combo rack, it doesn't really work there. The feet get in the way. But just a normal power rack is great for this. So hopefully you can see from my videos generally how to set this up. A few big tips with this is that you can see where my barbell is put on the rack. You can give yourself a lot of space by actually putting the sleeve of the barbell on the opposite side for your lever there, and then putting a plate. So depending on if you feel like you're too close to the rack, or if you're feeling like your body is getting cramped up with these, you can give yourself some extra space that way and make the lever work very well. The other thing is that I actually didn't do a great job in this video. I should have set the far side of the barbell, that lever side, a little bit lower. So probably one notch lower would have been perfect. I think a lot of times people are setting up that far side too high. Like it just kind of feels right to set it higher. But what it does is it makes to where the angle of the plates ends up getting very steep. And so at that point, those plates that are getting near the end of the load on your side of the barbell hit the ground a little bit earlier. Now, if you have the far side of the barbell lower, that angle stays a little bit more natural, but also it really helps make the plane of that movement itself stay a little bit straighter. So you can imagine the higher you go, the more your side of the barbell is actually going to end up pulling forward and pull you forward, which is really relevant with our squatting. And it's actually going to show up a lot within this video as far as center of mass and all of that. So I genuinely think that this is a really good way to set it up. If you don't have a belt squat, this is a really good home gym tool, or in your gym or anything. It feels really good. It really does. And it can be loaded really well. So I never really tried to max it out, but I was putting a good number of plates on there and it felt pretty hard. And I've had some strong lifters do these as well. So some people are definitely going to be too strong for this, I think. If you have kilo plates, I don't think that you'll be too strong for this. I think you can be really effective with it. The range of motion is really good. This ends up being a pretty good tool for a lot of people. So one of the first starting points that we really want to have is going to be understanding the mechanics of the belt squat. And I think the starting point here is going to be that the belt squat should mimic our squat, and we do want to maintain our center of mass on top of our feet. But the barbell is not on our back, and specifically it's not on our upper back. So our center of mass is actually going to need to be based around our feet and where the belt is connecting to our hips. And I think a lot of times people run into issues when they're doing belt squats because they're thinking too much about being too upright. They're trying to fight that pattern a little bit too much. And the more upright that you are actually going to be making the force, the line of pull from where the belt is connected to your hips, kind of through your feet, significantly more diagonal. It's not going to be quite as up and down. The further behind that connection to the belt squat itself, you're going to have more forces pulling you forward. So a lot of times people do run into balance issues just because of the way that they're trying to maybe mimic their competition squat, or they're trying to make it be more upright to get more quads. And we'll talk about those things. I think that they are potentially relevant, and not always terrible ideas. But the more upright that you are in the squat, it potentially is going to move your hips further back, and that's going to pull you forward. So if we just acknowledge it first, that we do need to make sure that the actual line of force from our hips through the floor, essentially around our feet, that's where we need to maintain that center of mass. Now, it's really not going to be all that much different than where the barbell is on our back, or like the feel of the mechanics really shouldn't be all that much different. But that's one of the main issues where I think a lot of times people are feeling like they're having trouble loading it, and very, very often feeling like the bottom of the lift feels very awkward because they're off balance at the bottom, and they're trying to just lift in a way that's not transferring the force directly from their hips kind of down into the ground. So maybe this is a good spot to kind of cue the starting strength stuff, that hip drive, somebody having their hand on your low back. That's exactly this. And I think that those angles actually do work really, really well. So going along with that, I just wouldn't worry too much about your trunk angle. Having a kind of a nice natural hinge that starts you off in a relatively upright but comfortable position up top. You should be able to maintain that position all the way through the bottom while keeping your balance on top of your feet. But when I say that, oftentimes I'm talking to clients, people will end up just having their hips shoot way up. And what ends up being the problem with that is that's not how our actual squat feels. And that is a big cornerstone of this video, is that we are trying to load it in a way that strengthens our quads and that we can put a lot of weight on the bar, but we're also trying to make it actually mimic what we need to feel in our squat pattern. And so much of that is the bottom portion, probably the bottom third, from the bottom portion of the squat to kind of that sticking point around a third of the way up, to where our knees are just going to have to move back anyway. But very often when I'm watching potentially even good lifters on Instagram do these belt squats, they're doing them in a way to where their balance is really shifting back. The trunk angle is changing a whole lot. The hips are really rising a whole lot. And so when we do that, we're moving it to where our quads, and we can just kind of think of knees. If our knees are moving back away from our toes, we're kind of skipping the hardest, the most loaded portion for our legs in the squat. And so that's pretty relevant here. Now, I don't know that it's actually like a terrible quad stimulus, and I think that you can still get your legs bigger and stronger by doing it. But one of the main benefits that people can and should get out of belt squats is that they can learn how to really fight through those bottom positions, through the mid-range, and really use their legs, learn how to use their legs really, really effectively. And just understanding what that actually feels like. That was a big deal in my hypertrophy video, that people learning how to work hard is like a cornerstone of being able to get stronger. And the belt squat is a really, really big deal for that. So there may be other tools that we don't actually have to manage that balance all that much. Leg press, hack squat, pendulum squat. All of those can be potentially slightly better exercises for hypertrophy because we just kind of can't do them wrong. That we're going to get in our quads really well, and it's going to be a really effective stimulus. But with belt squats, I think that the difference between these two is, while there may be some extra kind of peripheral effort that ends up maybe making it a slightly worse, maybe, exercise for hypertrophy, it potentially is a better exercise for people learning how to maintain the positions that they really need to be in for their actual squat patterns, particularly through those hard moments. So if you're letting yourself move away from those and move around those, then that's a big problem. So it starts with being able to actually understand where your leverage, where your weight needs to be, but then getting really good at fighting in those positions in the first place. Now, I do think that there are certain populations of lifters that get a whole lot more out of belt squats than other lifters. I am definitely one of those lifters. My squat style is unique, wider stance squat. And I think even a lot of times people will say that my knees just don't go that forward over my toes. That's not for lack of trying necessarily. I'm very much cueing knees forward, but just because of my stance, there's just kind of not a lot of room for my knees to actually move in that position and maintain a balanced position over my feet. So all of these things, I'm still doing all of that, even if kind of visually it doesn't really look that way. But I have been somebody who historically have really struggled to feel my legs really effectively and do all of this stuff, to stay on my legs. And years back when belt squats started to get a whole lot more popular, the belt squat was absolutely one of the biggest things that took my squat to the next level. I remember talking about how I really felt like I was just stuck at around 600 pounds on squat. And then at that point, got the belt squat, leaned into it a whole lot more, started doing a whole lot more reps with it, and pretty quickly was able to squat 300 kilos, 660, and get, significantly closer to a 700-pound squat and now go beyond it. And I think that my body style, body structure, is probably something that many lifters who maybe are built similarly to me should think more about doing potentially more belt squats and maybe not so much competition squat volume. So belt squats can be a really, really useful tool for people who maybe feel beat up from squatting a lot. Their backs feel beat up, their adductors, just all of that actually ends up feeling like it's disrupting other work. Belt squats as a substitute for some amount of volume can feel really good. The other big thing for me with my wider stance squat, I talked about this on my wide stance squat video for Powerlifting Now, but belt squats are one of the few lower body accessories that really do feel like my squat pattern. Leg press and pendulum squats and all of that have been good to build my quads, but I've felt like they've taken a long time to actually get those exercises, strength that I've built on those to actually show up on my squat. Belt squat is kind of the exact opposite for me. That basically anytime I'm able to add a little bit of weight on my belt squat, I pretty much immediately feel that success showing up on my actual competition squat. So belt squats are one that can be a great tool for building muscle and all that, but also really a kind of a core primary training tool for a lot of people, especially people who maybe don't tolerate actual squat volume all that much. On the other side of it, there may be people who really get less returns from it, people who are squattier, who have shorter legs, who are able to stay more upright, who feel their legs very naturally when they squat. Those people, the belt squat, they may not be getting all of those extra things that kind of I lacked in my normal squat pattern. And they may find a little bit more value leaning into some of those other exercises that may actually target the quads a bit more effectively because they're already getting enough of that skill work or whatever from their normal competition squats. And just straight up getting their quads stronger faster may be a better tool for those people. So we already talked about some of the mistakes that people make when they're actually trying to execute their belt squats. Being too upright, which affects their center of mass down at the bottom. Not actually trying to maintain position on top of their legs and use their legs really, really well from the bottom. So what can we do to fix that? And I think there are a lot of pretty good options here, some pretty good solutions. And I think that not only people like me who just need a little bit more squat volume and it really helps train their legs, I think that getting really good at belt squats will help many of those people who are really struggling with the concepts around center of mass and kind of understanding how squat mechanics work. These things will go so far for those people. So if you are struggling with your squats and with your belt squats, I really think investing in these things, because there's going to be some feelings on your legs and your upper back and all of that stuff, these things will transfer for just about anybody. Even if you're kind of somebody who's built well for squatting, if you're struggling with some of the balance aspects of it, learning to be good at belt squats is going to be something that I think will really show up for you. So one of the popular tools for belt squats, or at least helping people learn how to do them, we'll dive into this a little bit, but people will use goblet squats on the belt squat. So holding a plate or holding a dumbbell or something like that. This is a popular tool amongst certain camps. And I think that I actually have historically, when asked about it, said that it's not a very good way to actually do belt squats because it's going to add an element of instability to it. And it's going to add kind of extra work, kind of peripheral work that we can't actually use to just load the legs really well and potentially disrupt a lot of the things that we did just talk about. But I do think that the people who struggle to do belt squats as far as balance and kind of coordination around it, using the goblet to feel where your balance and all that needs to be in the first place is an excellent tool. I really think that it's potentially an underrated tool in certain camps, particularly the drug-free camps. I think maybe underutilize some things like this, especially when people aren't all that good at it. So the two things that it does is it does provide a little bit of counterbalance, and that's relevant here because if we have the weight in front of us with that goblet, we'll just call it a goblet, and the weight is kind of pulling us forward, it gives us the ability to kind of manage our balance a little bit differently. So if the weight is pulling us forward, we have some weight in front, we can kind of offset that a little bit more and kind of learn what a more vertical pattern or just kind of a straight line with our squat actually feels like. But the problem with that is that as the weight of the belt goes up, the ability, the weight to offset that also needs to go up. And then there becomes some practicality issues of it that actually like picking up some heavy weight with your lower body, picking up like 100+ pound dumbbell to offset that. If you're just using a really light one, it starts to not offset it enough and not add as much value at that point. There's practicality issues around it. So I do think that it's probably a pretty good tool to be able to learn what we need to feel in these moments. There's also a big component of actually being able to manage your upper body in the lift. The goblet squat can do a pretty good job of that. So being able to fight for a little bit more extension without being overextended, kind of find a neutral position. The goblet tends to put people's shoulders in a neutral position, find a good brace, but then kind of maintain that stuff up top. I think that is also a very, very good thing for people to do. So if you're somebody who's struggling with balance, you're moving around a lot, you're using your hands too much, and there's just a lot of extra movement happening, I think learning how to do belt squats with a goblet squat or warming up with belt squats with a goblet squat is potentially a really, really good tool. But the issue comes from those things that I set up in the very beginning. That if the weight is not going to be heavy enough, the skill components, the extra strength, and even hypertrophy stuff is potentially going to be pretty limited. That by adding that extra bit of challenge, technical stuff up top, we're limiting the work that we're able to actually get from our legs. So that's where our hands come in. And I actually very much am a proponent of adding the stability of bracing on the uprights or the handles or whatever you're using. But I am for sure not a proponent of people using a lot of hands to really pull themselves up. So most of the time when I'm doing my belt squats, hopefully some of these videos, you can see it a little bit. I'm really trying not to white knuckle it. I'm trying to keep my hands kind of relatively loose. But even within that, I think that there is an important quality to talk about, that us not having the ability to grip, like if your hands were just loose, even on something super stable like a leg press, do a leg press with your hands in the air and tell me you're not, if you can match the amount of weight that you can use when actually gripping the handles on a leg press, I would be incredibly surprised. So just having that ability to grip can be helpful as well. But the other thing that we can get with it is the maintenance of our balance, kind of feedback of balance, and also the ability to kind of fight a little bit more with our upper body. So as the weight gets heavier and heavier, we can get a little bit of extra benefit from using our upper body to just maintain a little bit of balance. We can keep some of that extra shift that can really come in and disrupt our ability to actually stay on our legs well. So use your hands. I do think that it's a good way to actually do the belt squat. It's probably, in my mind, a better way than hanging onto the goblet. But if you can't do the goblet squat well in the belt squat, I don't think that you've earned the right to actually use your hands in the belt squat. And they really shouldn't look all that much different. So if you watch my squats, I'm trying to maintain a good trunk angle. I'm trying to fight for my posture on the belt squats. I'm trying to stay on my legs. I'm trying not to let my knees shift back out of the bottom of the squat. And I'm trying to work really, really hard. So looking at my squat, my belt squat, it looks like my squat. And that's a big deal within this. If you're somebody who uses a closer stance and more knees forward and all that, do that stuff. I think that that's exactly the way you should do it. You may find that you actually do need to cue a little bit more hinge in the squat. That's okay. I don't think that the trunk angle being super upright is all that relevant to the knee angle. Your knees can still move forward over your toes pretty naturally. You can still fight to get good tension in your legs. Just like if you were doing a leg press or something like that, you don't have to be upright to get your quads to be very stimulated. But I do think consistent trunk angle, relatively upright trunk angle, those are all things that really do show up in the skill of our lift when we're actually moving over to our competition squat. And those things do make a really big difference in actually getting the most out of your belt squat. So hopefully this video was helpful. Hopefully you can include belt squats even in your home gym and add more efficacy to them to increase your competition squat. And if you did like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.